afternoon, friends. Good afternoon. Today we're going to have live discussing the most interesting, important immigration news with me, attorney Alina Shaltsova. We're going to talk about first charges for failure to register. This, big registration requirement announced by the Trump administration. What happened with that? We're going to talk about courts pushing back against certain new immigration practices. And of course, in the end, I will be answering your guys' questions live. Welcome. If this is your first time here, again, my name is Alina Shaltsova. I'm a New York immigration attorney. I use my social media to share interesting immigration news, guys, with you, share my thoughts, tips, and of course, I answer your guys' questions live. Let me know where you're watching from. Say hello. Don't be shy. Like and share this stream. And of course, send your hearts. If you're watching me on TikTok, send your likes on YouTube and on Facebook. You have stars, and we're going to start. We have some interesting developments to talk about. I cannot say they're shockingly surprising, but nevertheless very important. Why? Because, with this new administration, we are in a completely new environment, a new situation, new policies, and you need to know about them. Well, first, big change that this administration, well, maybe not the first one, but nevertheless very important change that this administration introduced is this new registration requirement for aliens, how they refer to undocumented residents, to register, to declare themselves in the United States. And believe it or not, but already we have reports that for the first time in the modern history, there were cases like this before, but prior to 1980s, a person in fact was charged by the federal authorities for failure to register. And the way it happened was that, of course, person was driving, and it seems it happened in Arizona, and the person was undocumented, and they were stopped for traffic violation. I believe they were under influence, or at least those were the charges against the person. And in addition to these state law charges, the federal government brought charges under this new registration requirement for failure to register. And I have to tell you that this is not an easy question for judges to deal with, because it's a new question for the courts, relatively new question. And the federal judge in this particular case struggled a little bit with the concept. And the judge stated, for example, after doing her own research, that she said that the law, it seems, requires the government to show that the accused made a willful decision not to register. All right, so it was not just neglect on the person's behalf, that they were careless, that they specifically made decision, they made their choice not to register, which usually is not so easy to prove. I do not know how the government is going to be trying to prove the charges in this particular case, but nevertheless, we have this incident. It means that anybody else can be charged as well, and it seems they will be charged, right? It's a misdemeanor under federal law, but again, it's a federal charge that you do not want to have. Why would you want to have? And I have a video on my website about who has to register and how to go about this. I have a blog on my website, shaltsova.com. And of course, you can always find information at USCIS.gov website. If someone came to the United States and overstayed their visa, in most cases, they are already registered. If you ever filed for something but your case was denied, in most cases, you were fingerprinted and you are already registered. If you came to the United States on CBP-1 parole and you were placed in removal proceedings, you are registered, and so on and so forth. So many of you are already registered. They really target people who entered without inspection and never did anything about it, basically stayed under the radar all this time, and they're not registered. These are the people who may be charged with this particular offense. Again, you have to know about this, you have to follow the law. Please consult with an attorney if you're not sure if you have to register or not. Another interesting situation there with children who came to the United States before the age of 14. They didn't have to be fingerprinted, and now they have to be fingerprinted, right? Again, verify with the attorney if that requirement concerns your kids. Now we have more interesting developments. Let's see. US citizen visiting Arizona was detained by immigration agents for 10 days. Now Trump administration also sometimes, it seems, arrests US citizens. If you are following my social media, I have excellent video, short video, under 60 seconds about this. I understand that we all have rights, especially if we're US citizens, and we don't have to answer any questions, as some lawyers, instruct you to do. But from a practical point, if you are a US citizen, I think it would be worth it for you to have easy access to proof that you do have citizenship to avoid this situation. This man, of course, probably is going to bring a lawsuit. Whether or not he's going to win that lawsuit is going to depend on the circumstances under which this whole fiasco happened. Okay? But honestly, just think about this. Do you want to spend 10 days in prison? Maybe the government isn't correct, or maybe they are, because in certain situations they may detain you to verify um, your status. You have to know about this. My advice usually when I talk to my clients, if you can avoid trouble, do everything you can to resolve the situation peacefully. But if you cannot, then you fight full force. I'm talking about legal fights, of course, not physical fights, okay? But seriously, it's like imagine the stress that he had to go through and his family, unimaginable. 10 days in immigration prison is eternity. Those places are not nice, I'm telling you. And the number is only growing. Today I read news that the government makes more and more contracts with private facilities to have more and more immigration detention beds. It means they will not stop, and they're trying to increase the number of immigration detention beds available for detention. We also have some relatively good news. For example, Florida stopped finally arresting people after the federal judge told them to stop doing it on April 4th. Apparently, despite the judge's ruling, the arrests continued. I'm talking about the arrests under Florida state law, where the law says that if you entered the state and you are undocumented, you're subject to Florida penalties, not federal penalties. So the federal judge ordered, if I'm not mistaken, on April 4th to stop this practice. The government didn't stop. The federal judge was in shock that the order was not followed, and now, finally, after instructions to the government, the Florida stopped arrests. For how long, I do not know. Well, the good news is that at least somebody is listening to judges. I have to tell you, it's very, very good news. We also have United States Supreme Court issuing decisions on Saturday. I think temporary stopping deportations of Venezuelans in the northern district of Texas, deportations to El Salvador. I do not know if anything happened today with regard to that case, but on Saturday that was the decision. And again, I see it as a positive. We'll see what's going to happen, right? You never know these days. But we do definitely see that some federal courts, at least, are pushing back to certain practices, against certain practices. And ACLU does an excellent, excellent job bringing those, cases and fighting tooth and nail. They're amazing, absolutely amazing. And now, if you guys have questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. I hope everybody's doing great today. Let's see. Say hello. Don't be shy. Let's see. Hi, Danilo. Why does it take so long um, to approval of removal of condition? I have 20 months already jointly in Nebraska. Why does it take so long to receive a decision on I-751 petition? I wish I knew the answer. But 21 months, it's not that long, Danilo. The problem is that the government automatically extends your existing green card for 48 months. Why do you think they do that? Because they believe it may take up to 48 months for them to make that decision. Okay? I think there are multiple issues here. Probably lack of officers, most likely. They don't have enough staff, trained staff, to process these cases. Some cases do get approved very quickly, but some get stuck. It doesn't mean that your case is not going to be approved. It doesn't mean that. It's just that probably un, I wouldn't say bad luck. It's not anything. It's just within processing times. All right. People who get approval faster, those are lucky people. The officer was ready, didn't have other cases in line, and that's what happened. And you got stuck a little bit. All right. All right. All right. Hi, Aviator Dude. How are you? For you helping us, thank you. Florida, Naples. It's been almost 5 months since I was documentary qualified for immigrant immediate relative visa. Still waiting for the interview date in Rio de Janeiro. All right, 5 months. Well, I think in Rio de Janeiro, the target is like 6 months usually for the interview date. So I think that soon you will be called for the interview. And of course, if your US citizen has good reasons for you to ask to expedite the case, you guys can try that and try to get that interview faster. All right. Hi, Orlando. Any chance for asylum court case hearing? Why not? Generally speaking, guys, asylum cases get approved much better by the judges than by officers. Generally speaking, approval rate is higher in courts than in asylum offices when you just go for affirmative interview. Hi, guys on TikTok. Let me see your questions. All right. Any reports of people that already registered? Did anything happen to them? Nothing's going to happen to them. They're already registered. The only thing that the government says, once you're registered, you have to have proof of registration always on you. All right. So I would read it as such. If you entered on a visa, make sure that you have that I-94 on you, even though you should be able to retrieve this information after, I believe, year 2000, but very often the system doesn't have that information. So if you have I-94, I-94W, I-95 card, have a copy of that. If you entered on a visa, if you filed anything ever, just have those receipts on you. Sometimes receipts can also save you a lot of trouble and save you from being detained. So just keep that in mind. All right. All right. Hi, KK. Right. I think, KK, you have some question about criminal record, right? Report says no weapon and held to floor while robber took money, false imprisonment for U visa. Will you be able to qualify for the U visa if you were a victim of a robbery? Generally speaking, yes. I believe robbery is one of those crimes on the list that the government is checking you against when they decide whether or not you qualify for the U visa. Why don't you ask them to sign the U visa certification, or better yet, prior to starting anything, consult with an attorney, show them the charges, show them the record, talk about the damages that you suffered, emotional, physical, financial, and then a lawyer is going to give you good advice, hopefully, whether or not you should proceed with that U visa filing. If you would like to consult with my office, please give us a call, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday, right? I do charge for consultation. when I have confidential consultations. Hi, Donna. If I was shot, at while driving, but my car was the only thing that hit, can I get a U visa? Well, I guess it depends. Where did you file a police report, right? Did the police confirm that you were assaulted this way with a weapon? Where the bullet went? Did anybody find the bullet? If you have verifiable information and the police created the report that you were victim of assault with a firearm this way, you may have a shot. You may have a shot. You may have a chance. All right, and we also need to see if you suffered serious damage. That's very important, right? Because that's what they also look at. Were you traumatized because of this experience? Uh, did it make you to lose your way and you hit something? Different details here matter, all right, when they decide um, whether or not they will be approving that your visa certification first and your visa afterwards. Hi, Freddie. They canceled my interview for the green card. Why? Sometimes the reason is not that serious. Sometimes um, they have some logistic changes, like they have to change buildings, rooms, there are repairs going on. So I wouldn't really be worried about that. Okay. Usually, when they cancel, they will reschedule it pretty shortly. Does getting married affect your visa eligibility for parents? Yes, it may. It may. So you need to talk with an attorney. All right. If you are getting aged out, you stop being qualified as a dependent. It may. All right. Let's see. I lost my green card. Hi, Anna, and I filed to replace it. And it's over a year. Can you advise, please? Guys, it's very common that when you ask for replacement of the green card, you're going to wait for years, literally. In the meantime, of course, you can have temporary proof of your status, absolutely. You can make an appointment with USCIS, they can give you a stamp, but it does take a long time. Again, it's not for nothing that they give you automatic extensions for several years when you file Form I-90. It's because they're slow. They're slow. Another unpleasant surprise for you. Once you lose an identification immigration document for a very long time while traveling internationally, you will be subject to secondary inspection. Okay? Because the government now will have to absolutely make sure that your green card is not going to be used by someone else to enter the United States. And you need to be ready for that. All right? I wish so badly for them to find your green card somewhere so you don't have to deal with this. But the truth is, like, you're stuck in those secondaries for a long time now. All right. Do we have more questions? Entry with Esther from Portugal in 2011. Have you registered? I believe you have. If you were, you have that card, probably I-94W you probably have, or maybe I-95, I'm not sure, during that time what card they used. And if you were fingerprinted at the border, then you should have been registered. Okay, 2011 is relatively recent. That's getting married. Yes, yes, yes. We spoke about that. Do you take your visa cases in Brooklyn, New York? Absolutely, of course. I practice in New York, but I help people from all 50 states and overseas. Immigration law is a federal law, so an attorney licensed anywhere in the United States may practice immigration law federally, speaking anywhere. I am licensed in New York. I sat for the hardest bar exam in this country and I passed it from the first shot. All right. Hi, Abdul. If you are not on the parole program and applied for asylum, did the pause affected you from getting work permit? No, no. You should be able to get your work permit just like everybody else who's asylum filer, right? All right. Okay. Hi, Natalia. We're a family with a pending asylum case. We have 4 children, one of whom was born here. What documents would you advise us to prepare in case of unfavorable outcome in the case? All right, so if you have asylum pending and you're afraid that uh, at the interview you will be after the interview you will be denied, your case, if you don't have at that time legal status like parole or TPS or anything, your case will be referred to court. And in court, you're going to have one more chance at winning your case. Usually, it means that you will have to update your asylum application. Maybe if you don't have, and you would not have for the interview, have country conditions expert report. They're very helpful. The fact that you have a US born child matters only if you would qualify for cancellation of removal in addition to asylum. Okay, otherwise, unfortunately, it will not matter for asylum cases. Yep. Hi, Morris. When DV lottery results are coming in? Usually early May. Early May, they're released like May 7th, May 8th, May 10th, something like that. Okay. All right, let me see. What is the difference between real ID and driver's license? Hi, Rashad. Okay, so real ID is driver's license or state ID where you've been verified to have legal status in the United States. That's what real ID is. So if you look at the document, it's going to look just like your previous driver's license, only depending on the state and the level of that real ID that you will be receiving is going to have in the upper right corner a star or a flag in New York. Okay, so that's what real ID is. It means that it's good for federal purposes. Okay, but there are real ID compliant documents that you can use for federal purposes. For example, foreign passport is that, work permit is that, green card is also that, and there is a long list of other real ID compliant documents. You can read about them on my website, shaltsova.com. My recent blog actually lists all of them and provides links to the government sources, resources about that. All right. Hi, Simal. I applied for adjustment of status in October. When to expect an interview? Well, usually 8 to 9 months after from the date you filed. That's when you usually will be called for the interview. Hi, Ustad Shakir. My interview for green card or permanent registration was canceled twice last year. Any reason? I wouldn't know. If you guys didn't ask for the interview to be rescheduled, I think the best person to ask about that would be your attorney. Also, pay attention to the dates. There was a date, for example, last year when unexpectedly for everyone it was announced to be a federal holiday. And if you had previously scheduled interviews on that date, they were canceled. Okay. So maybe you were just lucky twice when your date fell on that federal holiday, or maybe snow day, maybe there was something else. But typically, there is no real meaning behind why they do it. Sometimes they do it because they realized your case was supposed to be considered by VAWA division, because that's a separate division. Sometimes I saw that they would cancel the interview because they will send the case somewhere else. Hi, Andrea. I have a permanent green card. Should I hire a lawyer for my naturalization interview? I'm nervous. Of course, if you're nervous, take a lawyer with you. In the United States, you can take an attorney with you any way you want. There is no prejudice if you take a lawyer. Nobody's going to think that your case is better or worse just because you have a lawyer. In fact, if you have an attorney and it's a good lawyer, the government will think, well, a good lawyer is representing this person. Most likely their case is real. Most likely they're prepared to fight if something goes wrong. So they would pay a closer look at your case in a positive way than otherwise. In fact, I've noticed that a lot of marriage cases that are filed without an attorney, not every case, but a lot, face trouble down the road because they didn't have an attorney. Either the case was poorly prepared or the government suspected fraud because the case was poorly prepared and there was no lawyer. So the government sees it as no lawyer wanted to take their case. Something is wrong because good lawyers, not they don't take fraudulent cases. Okay, we have an obligation to make sure that the case, at least the way we make our judgment and our best judgment, the case is a good real case. I spend time questioning clients about their relationship because I don't need any surprises in my practice. I spend time questioning them about asylum claim. If I determine that they have marriage that I think they will have hard time proving is real, I'll honestly going to let them know and I will turn down such a case. I'm sorry. Okay? So I'm happy to help anyone, but not someone who is trying to break the law. I cannot do that. And I'm very upfront about this. I do not want to charge anybody any money and don't want anything to do with cases that may obviously turn, sour, because lawyers who do this, who cover for someone else like that, they jeopardize not only their reputation, but all other cases that they take. You understand? So it's kind of like, not the right thing to do. Not only that it's a crime, also, to bring forward a fraudulent case, but also you betray all other clients who have real cases. Hi, Feroz, waiting 19 months for I-751. Does starting divorce affect I-751? Of course it does. The good thing is this. When you filed your I-751 jointly, but now unfortunately marriage fell apart, right? It was a real marriage, but it fell apart. You have a chance to change your I-751 that was filed jointly to waiver based. Just work with an attorney and they're going to help you to go through that. And then you still may receive your 10-year green card, but the basis for your I-751 will be different. That's what it is. Thank you, Ron, for your gift. All right. In 2017, I applied for a U visa with my parents as a beneficiary. Does getting married affecting them? Affecting them? Well, who was the main beneficiary? Who was the main filer? The thing is this: for U visa, there are special rules. Sometimes parents can benefit when children were victims of crimes, even if the children were U.S. citizens. So why don't you speak with your attorney? All right, because I just don't know and I do not want to make a mistake here. Show them your paperwork, your ground for U visa, and then they will be able to give you a definite answer. Okay, because that's just far way too serious of a question for me to give you incorrect advice if I misunderstand you. All right, based on these 2 lines that you sent me. Is it even worth at the risk to file N400 nowadays? What do you mean the risk? If you have a clean case, there is no much risk for you. If you had received your green card lawfully, if you cannot be accused of abandoning your green card, if you don't have disqualifying criminal convictions, why would you so intimidated not to file for your citizenship when you qualify for it? Of course, there are tons of cases being approved. Guys, you have to understand something. Not everyone who comes to the United States gets detained in the airport. Not every green card holder is losing their green cards. All right? Yes, it's a tougher situation than we had before, but still, lots of people get approvals every day. If you qualify for it, they didn't shut down USCIS. You go for your benefits. The difference is, I guess, the huge difference that I see is that now almost every case where a permanent resident is getting detained in the airport gets nationwide media coverage. It wasn't like that before. That's the big difference. Is CBP tougher, stricter? Yes, absolutely. If 2 years ago you've been missing from the United States for 7 months and you're trying to enter back, they can ask you a couple questions and they wouldn't make a big deal about it. Now, most likely they're going to make a big deal about it, but that's the difference, all right? So, knowing that, don't leave the United States without filing for re-entry permit. If you had ever criminal conviction, consult with an attorney. Make sure that it's not going to be a problem and that you are not going to be regarded as person seeking admission even though you have a green card upon your return to the United States if you were ever arrested in the United States. That's just common sense, all right? So if before, previously, CBP officers were more lenient on you, now policies got harder. But if you're somebody who doesn't have violations, no criminal records, you pay your taxes, there are no unlawful acts, why do you need to be so paranoid that you're going to forgo your qualifications for citizenship and not file? No, of course you have to file. Don't be so paranoid, okay? Is it a good thing to upload unsolicited proof of relationship evidence married to a US citizen? And if you can upload it, upload it. What they're going to do, they cannot throw it out. All right, if you were to mail it, they probably can kick it back saying it's unsolicited mail. All right. Hi, Lotfi, as a green card holder, how can I marry someone with B2 visa in the United States and how long the process will take? The process of marriage is very quick. You go, you file for that marriage license, and you guys get married. Whether or not that person is going to benefit from your status is a whole different story. Because if you just have a green card and you marry somebody who doesn't have um, long term lawful non immigrant status, because B1, B2 is usually maximum for 6 months, that person is going to probably fall out of status prior to you being able to help them to file for adjustment of status. The thing is this, or maybe not, it depends on visibility. You have to look at the visibility and you see how long and when an applicant for adjustment of status based on F2A category for spouses of lawful permanent residents have to wait in order to submit the adjustment of status. So currently, I think if you use dates for filing, it's only 6 months that they have to wait and remain in the United States in lawful non-immigrant status prior to them being able to file for adjustment of status. If today you submit I-130, of course, by then you have to be married. So the gap in time is 6 months. Well, technically, probably a person, if they file for an extension, but then again, it's like funny business because if you file for an extension for your B1, B2, knowing that you're going to be filing for adjustment of status, you may be charged with fraud, all right? So usually what happens is that when you marry here a green card holder, you cannot benefit currently from their status directly until they become, that green card holder becomes a US citizen. Why? Just because the way it's set up, you will not be able to maintain lawful in most situations, but not always, lawful non-immigrant status up until the time when you can use that green card holder's I-130 petition to file for the adjustment of status. Because there is a gap in time. If you marry a US citizen, you can have concurrent process. Two parts of the process, I-130 and I-45, can be filed together. When you marry a green card holder, you have to look at the visibility when you can file for adjustment of status after I-130 is filed. I have an excellent video about this on my YouTube channel. Who can get a green card in the United States? All right? So it explains the process of adjustment of status by stages and why some people can quickly get the green card and some can't. They get stuck in the process for a long time. Hi, Phoenicia. My green card is expired. Can I still apply for citizenship? Yes, you can. Currently, at least to my knowledge, they have not changed that. All right. But you may want to talk to an attorney. If it expired long, long time ago, you may have some issues. So we need to see what's happening, okay? My asylum was dismissed, stating that my child should file for me. She gave fingerprints for citizenship and still waiting. Am I at risk? And is there anything I should do to be protected? Well, if your asylum case was pending in court and the case against you, deportation case, was dismissed with hopes of adjusting status after your kid becomes a US citizen, then at this time, I understand that there is no other relief. All you need to do is to hope that the government would not place you again into deportation proceedings, right? But if they do, I think you'll be able to get out of it. That's why they dismissed your case to begin with. They realized it's a waste of their resources. If you have this relationship where a US citizen child can petition for you in the nearest future, it's a waste of government time and money to place you in removal proceedings because you will be able to adjust, right? So I guess all you need to do for now is to wait for your kid to become a citizen and then they will file for you because otherwise they wouldn't be dismissing your case. If you were not adjustable, they would not let you go from that court, right? That's what's going on. All right. Let me see. Do we have more questions? Hi, user 1908. In 2017, I applied for a U visa. Okay, we discussed that. Now you want to get married. Yeah, you got older and you want to have your separate life. Yep. So you will need to speak with your attorney about that, right? And see who filed for home, who is benefiting from home, and things like that. Husband I-751 processing and N400 not sent. Green card extended for 2 years. Is it safe to travel? You are safe usually to travel with your green card extension. There are no issues unless there is something more to your situation, right? Arrest, charges, potential allegations of fraudulent marriage. Then don't travel. Okay. The biggest issue in marriage cases, the biggest issue that you may face is difficulty proving that you have a real marriage. A lot of people have real marriage, but they are not focusing on documenting it. And God forbid, down the road, something happens with that marriage. People get tired of each other, they decide to go separate ways. Somebody is making more money, somebody is making less money, somebody decides to move to a different state for studies, for work. Marriage falls apart. The non citizen is facing with a horrible, horrible situation because that non citizen may be accused of fraudulent marriage just because their marriage was not properly documented. So, if you're married, please collect every single paper that you receive together or separately that comes to the same address. Junk mail, invitations to parties, membership in grocery stores, gyms, of course, you're filing taxes together. You should have utility bills under both names. If you guys own property, you're going to have that homeowners insurance property, what is called policy. If you're renting, you also can have insurance. It's called home renters insurance, life insurance, and things like that. Do not think that just because you're young and you have a real marriage, it's going to be automatic. It will not. I again am telling you, USCIS is an extremely conservative organization. They will not, and they do not want to understand why you have open marriage and you decided to date other people. They will not accept it that you decided to live in Alaska and your husband in Hawaii and you meet every 6 months and you have a real marriage. They're extremely conservative. In certain cases, you can overcome their suspicion, but it's very hard. Do you want to place yourself in that situation? Again, remember my advice: if you can avoid trouble, do everything that you can to avoid it rather than paying thousands of dollars later to lawyers and getting stuck in this very unpleasant process of being accused of violating immigration laws. You don't want that. So, from the very beginning, prepare very well and take even case like marriage very seriously, okay? Because you do not want to be in that mess. All right, guys, listen, thank you very much for joining tonight and asking your questions. It was very interesting, right? I hope you learned something as well. Don't forget to sign up for my social media, follow if you haven't, so that we can meet again. And of course, on my social media, throughout the week, I share different updates, tips, things that may be helpful to you or your friends. And why not, right? Let me answer this question from Peace on Earth, who was very generous today. On YouTube, I can accept little gifts. They're like, tiny money, but it's very sweet that you guys sharing. It's extremely appreciated. Let me share this little question. If I granted I-601 waiver for a crime approved in conjunction with I-45 approved, does it only cover inadmissibility, and what to do if a crime makes you deportable also? All right. So it clears you up for good. When you're filing for adjustment of status, you're being checked against inadmissibility. Okay? That's what it is. And deportability if you commit crime after you become a green card holder. So I think you should be fine. All right. Crime is not an aggravated felony, but committed within 5 years of entry. You should be all right because you were cleared of that issue. You were vetted. You received your green card. And if the government thought that you are not worthy of the waivers, they wouldn't have granted it. Okay. So I think you'll be okay. If there is something more going on, if there was something past happened that after you received the waiver and your green card, then of course work with an attorney. But you typically speaking, if you received a waiver for certain conduct, it means you are forgiven and that issue is resolved. All right. Also, that's why it's so important to stay in touch with good attorneys. Remember, guys, here, like a month ago at this point, I think, I found a case from the Board of Immigration Appeals or some federal court. I don't remember anymore, but the case was very good. It was about the fact that the court explained, generally speaking, that they take immigration law at the time when the crime was committed, and that's how they look at your inadmissibility or deportability issue, not at the time when they decide your matter. It's very important to remember that. That's the general principle. So if you work with a good lawyer, they can find some case law to support your case and your theory. But remember, United States system is all about precedents, and not two cases are alike. Sometimes when you read cases, you're like, hey, what happened here? It was decided differently than I read about it. That's why advocacy plays huge part in your immigration process, right? You may say, hey, what happened? My case is just like my friend's, but your friend had a better lawyer and they were able to convince USCIS or courts that their case should be granted. All right? So it happens. All right, guys, thank you very much again. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, be nice to each other. And I hope to see you soon.